My knowledge about land acknowledgements, territorial acknowledgements, treaty acknowledgements, ancestral land acknowledgements is just that it's a combination of things. And I think the first thing I often say to folks is you're not going to find a manual on how to draft, create a land acknowledgement. I think for me, it's an exercise in relationship building, because I'm going to talk about institutions, when they build these words, the hope is that they're done in partnership with Indigenous communities that they're speaking about, to co-create those words. And I remember, I think it was Nancy Rowe who articulated it super well. She said, um, the process is actually reconciliatory in nature because we're building a relationship, the process of creation. And so I always say the process of creation is equally as important as the product. But when we talk about the differences, what I've kind of learned over my time is a few things. So number one, I often state that as original people, we, different nations have different ways of, doing their land acknowledgements. They've been doing them since the beginning of time. So I think that's the first thing, is we understand is that, original people have their own ways and distinct ways of acknowledging their territories and creation, I should speak to. The second sort of notion and understanding I have is that you'll hear a lot about ancestral land acknowledgements. And for me, those words are speaking about the creation stories that root people to a particular place. One of the things that has just the theories that just burns every Indigenous person is this Bering Strait theory, right? That is so wrong and been proven wrong over and over and over again. Our creation stories tell us we are from a specific place. And so if you hear people talking about the ancestral lands of, that is like, you should be queuing in to say, this is the people's belief of where they are of this place. They come from this place. They didn't come from somewhere else. They are of this place. So that's the second way I've heard, I'm going to use the word land acknowledgements. When I hear the word territorial land acknowledgements, what I think about in that regard is going back to sovereignty. I think about those who have right and title to the lands. Okay. And so that gets into that nationhood, sovereignty, self-determination, the land base, right? Right and title to lands. And then the last way that I think about how I hear land acknowledgements is I hear treaty acknowledgements. So the agreements that were made upon those lands that continue to exist today, and the acknowledgement that, we've heard the statement, we are a treaty people, we are all treaty people. It's the acknowledgement that there's agreements on that land that everybody is participatory in, whether you know it or not. And I think it's really important. One of the things I say is the first thing you can do is learn your treaty, understand your treaty and your responsibilities. So, I guess I can talk about the process of creation and what makes a good one later, what I think makes a good one. But, what I often say about land acknowledgements is that those kind of four categories that I just spoke about, or three categories, I should say, a land acknowledgement can include any or all of those things. And it's up to the people to determine that. It's up to the creators, the community and the people to determine that. But for me, all of these words, we can say whatever we want, we can acknowledge whatever we want, but if we can't make the connection between those words and the benefit to Indigenous people, to treaty partners, then we've got a lot of work to do on the in-between. Or else why are we saying them, right? There's got to be some benefit for Indigenous people at the end of it. And I remember it was my friend Troy Miracle who said to me, he said, Nick, he said, what I keep hearing about is that people don't understand the full truth of what happened here. The timeline on that was that a month and a half before that, there was the recovery of young people happening for the, our elders and survivors had talked with us for a very long time that, there were young people buried at residential schools, but it took Kamloops and that to come into full focus, that people were shook by that, and they really didn't understand the depth, and again, the depth and complexity of the issues that we're talking about in the history. And so it was at that moment in time when I was taking the feedback, and Troy said, people need to know more about the truths. And I think we called it expanding our understanding of truth before reconciliation. And so the goal there was not to, is not to stay in a zone of trauma, but in a zone of exploration about what has happened here. And I think, I tried to move that unit forward, or that work forward at the end, to talk about strength, resiliency, resistance, by highlighting beautiful people, Indigenous people who are doing the work of the vitality within our communities and revitalization, right, in many capacities, and are our warriors for our people today. And so, that was the thinking within that e-course, and it was really spurred upon by, again, understanding the depth of the truth and the things that have gone on here. It was meant to scratch the surface, right? It was meant to be a prompt for further learning.